Pioneer DJ already own a big chunk of the Pro DJ turntable market and have done so for some years thanks to the PLX-1000. Like the majority of tables in that category, the 1000 was built from the Hanpin Super OEM template. Watch my review of the Reloop RP7000 Mark II if you want a full explanation of what that's all about. In summary though, Hanpin make a very high performance motor and tone arm, and companies like Stanton, Reloop, Mixars and Pioneer DJ have used those as the core around which they've built some very different but all excellent turntables. The PLX-CRSS12 is something new altogether, however. Yes, it has that familiar tone arm and motor, but the CRSS12 has a completely custom control mechanism and is in fact what Pioneer DJ are calling a digital analog hybrid turntable. It's way more than just a regular deck because it also offers built-in digital DVS control for DJ software. Therefore, there will be three main sections to this review. Firstly, I'll discuss the performance of the CRSS12 as an analog turntable, the fundamentals. Then I'll get into the digital aspects and how it interacts with software. And finally, we'll talk price and value. The first big notable thing about the CRSS12 is that it is very much designed to be used vertically or battle style, with the tone arms at the rear instead of to the right. This is obvious from the way all of the markings are printed on the turntable, but I do have to say that I actually really appreciate that Pioneer DJ haven't tried to do anything weird with the layout, like reposition the pitch slider or something like that. As someone who always uses turntables battle style myself, I like having all of the labels facing the right way for me for a change, but I also have years of muscle memory from using regular turntables the wrong way round, and so moving the location of the pitch control or start-stop buttons to suit the battle layout would have been more a hindrance than a help. The only real non-traditional layout move on the top panel is the change from a barrel-style power or motor off switch to a push button. I'm in two minds about that. On the one hand, it's not in the way as much, but on the other, if you rest your hand on the deck there, you could potentially activate it by mistake. What I like though is that when you do activate it, the start-stop button flashes as a visual indicator that you've done so, and you can re-engage the motor just by pressing that start-stop button. It isn't a two-step process. Of course, on other turntables, the power switch tower also holds the strobe LEDs for checking the speed calibration of your deck, but Pioneer DJ have, rather cleverly, put that into the lower half of the pop-up target light along with a brighter white LED for actual queuing purposes. A nice, neat touch. Where the battle style layout has led to some changes is when it comes to connectivity. The IEC power connector comes out of the left hand side where it usually would, and that's recessed deep enough to be able to route the cable out of the rear, and that's helped by a channel in the base of the deck. Then the power button, RCA sockets, ground terminal and USB-C socket are at the back of the CRSS12, also recessed underneath, making them easy to access in the booth. Overall, I'm very happy with that setup. It will be a bit more of a faff if you do run the decks in a more traditional horizontal layout, but not dramatically so. I'm sure some people would prefer the deck to be internally grounded, but an external ground terminal is one of those always reliable kind of things, and it does make it easier to diagnose and eliminate ground loops when they occur, so I'm good with that. Underneath the tone arm when it's at rest is a small OLED display. When using the digital features that shows a bit more stuff, but when just using the CRSS12 as a turntable it has two main functions: to show you your selected pitch range and allow you to access the utility menu. Aside from changing things like LED brightness and doing a factory reset, this also allows you to choose your preferred torque setting, with high being roughly the same as the PLX-1000, low being equivalent to a 1200 Mark VII and medium somewhere in between. I left it on high for most of my testing. That screen is nice, just big enough to see the info you need without taking up too much space. Its location seems pretty bad when you look at the CRSS12 from directly above, but when you're stood in front of the turntable it's a lot more visible, and the viewing angle is suitably wide. Brake speed adjustment is controlled externally with a 3-position switch facing you on the front edge of the deck. I liked the accessibility of this, but I couldn't quite find a setting which suited me perfectly, with the first being just a touch too aggressive and the second not quite aggressive enough. But that's not exactly a problem, just personal preference. After my disappointment with the Technics SL1200 Mark VIIs from an isolation perspective, that was the first aspect I tested on the CRSS12. On paper, it weighs a touch less than the PLX-1000, which has always isolated well, but Pioneer DJ have told me that it's actually designed to be more efficient at isolating vibration despite that lighter weight. The construction is fairly similar to the 1000, with various materials used in the build, like a die-cast zinc top panel, an 8mm thick resin base, and steel plates and rubber lagging internally. One tech change which will definitely impact on the isolation performance is the change to the power supply. Usually turntables like this have a big transformer inside, but with the Cross 12, Pioneer DJ have moved over to a switching power supply instead. That removes the inherent 50 or 60 Hz vibration caused by the transformer, reducing resonance from the turntable itself before feedback even begins. Sadly, I don't have a 1000 to compare it against, but I do have a Mark 7 in the lab and of course some SL1200 Mark IIs, so I did a simple but effective test. I set up each turntable directly on top of the subwoofer from the Master Sound's Clarity A sound system, review of that is coming soon, put down the needle and cranked the volume with a record both spinning and stationary. Unsurprisingly, as it weighs around 3 kilograms less than the other two, the 1200 Mark 7 hit the point of howling first by quite some margin. But when comparing the 1200 Mark II and the Cross 12, there was very little in it, with perhaps a slight edge going to the Cross 12. So I can say with confidence that the isolation performance of the Cross 12 is simply excellent. If you're playing real vinyl in a loud environment, then it should do the job very nicely. I will also point out that the big chunky feet are mounted on standard 6mm threads, so if you did want to replace them with something even more isolating, like Isonoe or MK Stan's feet, that should work fine. The tone arm, which is familiar from other handpin turntables and the PLX-1000, remains a solid performer. Like on the 1000, it is rubber lined internally to cut down on resonance, and it's highly adjustable. Plus, Pioneer DJ do include the small subweights for the rear to help you balance heavier cartridges. Another thing which I was a little surprised by was that there is no internal preamp in the Cross 12 to switch the output to line level. With all of the digital stuff going on, I had expected that, but it's not there for one main reason: sound quality. Even when bypassed, a preamp in the circuit will have an impact on the sound, and Pioneer DJ wanted to push out the very best quality, which I'm sure users of very high-end mixers, which already have top quality preamps in them, will appreciate. No, what you get with the Cross 12s is a direct feed from the cartridge via the tone arm wiring right out through your RCAs, and I dig that. Another aspect of the Cross 12 which has an impact on the sound quality and isolation is the included Magvel clamp. I'll talk more about this when we get to the digital aspects of the turntable, but it does loom large on the analog side too. Vinyl weights or clamps have long been an established part of the audiophile world for two main reasons. Firstly, they impact on sound quality. How much is endlessly debatable, but I've found myself that the Master Sounds weights, which I've used for years, do have a noticeable effect, tightening frequencies up, especially on the low end, by reducing resonance. Where they are unquestionably a help though is when playing records which are dished or warped. Let me give you a demonstration. So very quickly I want to show you the benefits of the Magvel clamp with regular vinyl, in particular regular vinyl that is dished and warped. So this is the Gabriel's Love and Hate in a Different Time, the Kerry Chandler remix, a record I absolutely love. It's actually the second copy I got because the first one was so warped it was unplayable, and then the second one came and that's also so warped that it's unplayable without any kind of weight or clamp. So we'll just try and get in there. It's dished so that the outside edge is raised up. It's not consistent around it. It's basically really impossible to play. The other side is okay because of course then the dish goes the other direction, but on the A side, which is the side I want to play, the outside edge is raised well above. You can hopefully see how bad it is there. Now of course the clamp or the weight is not a new idea. If I use the Master Sounds vinyl weight, which is what I generally would keep around with me for this kind of situation, it does improve things and it makes it playable. So let's get on. So that definitely helps. But with the Cross 12, you have a solution that literally comes with the turntable. You have the Magvel clamp. So get the clamp, pop it on, tighten it down as heavy as it will go. And you wouldn't think it would work with the outside edge being raised. It wouldn't work, but actually it does, because overall it is generally flattening out the vinyl. It does make that difference. So again, the Magvel clamp is on now, and this record has gone from being unplayable to playable. So outside of the digital side of things, the Magvel clamp is great for playing real vinyl with as well. As you might guess from the name, the Magvel clamp is, well, magnetic. When placed on the spindle, it automatically locks down on the mating section of the platter itself, which can move up or down a few millimeters and literally clamps the record to the platter. The top section features an adjustment dial, which then allows you to tweak the amount of clamping force applied. You'll want loads on there for a very warped record, or a lot less if you still want the vinyl more freed up for scratching. Aside from the two main benefits, the debatable impact on the sound and the unarguable impact to playing warped vinyl, the Magvel clamp should also help the isolation performance of the Cross-12 still further, as it helps cut down on resonance throughout the whole audio chain. I was a little bit concerned about a couple of things related to the clamp. Because of how it fits onto the spindle, I thought that spindle looked a touch skinny, but I went and bought some vernier calipers, and no, that's just an optical illusion. It's dead on 7mm in diameter, as it should be. I was also worried that for people who use thicker slip mats, or 45 heads who use Dr. Suzuki donuts like me, the main shaft wouldn't be quite tall enough, but on testing it, it works fine. With small hole 45s, the Magvel clamp is a fantastic addition, and with large hole ones you can still use your regular 45 adapters without issue. What I'd love to see, either from Pioneer DJ or a third party, would be a version of that Magvel clamp which also incorporated a 45 adapter. That's on my wish list for sure, because it would simply rock. Two other things to note. Firstly, the Magvel clamp has a dedicated area next to the tone arm where it sits when not in use, positioned on a small spindle. That should mean it doesn't get easily lost, and it brings me to the second thing. Replacement clamps are available in pairs for a very reasonable $60. I had feared a much higher price point than that, so I was happy to discover that, as it means if you do lose or break one, you won't be too much out of pocket. Moving on to the pitch and general mixing performance now, that's another area where the Cross-12 makes me happy. Like all other contemporary DJ turntables, including the Technics Mark 7, the Cross-12 has a digital pitch control, but this one performs extremely well. The pitch slider itself is clickless with no dead spot around the middle. There is a pitch reset button to quickly get to 0. And in use, it's very precise and stable without too much of the kind of push-pull effect which older handpin models often exhibited. It doesn't feel like the motor is trying to overcompensate as you make adjustments. My favourite digital pitch on a turntable until now was on the Technics Mark 7, and the Cross-12 is definitely on a par with that, if not slightly better. It's also very good at locking onto a pitch and staying there. I did the old test of running 2 copies of the same record on both decks to see how long they would stay in sync, and was able to play them right through each time. What's even more impressive was that I was able to do that same test with the same results, but with the pitch on both decks at plus 8%, which means that the calibration was identical with both the units I had on test. The pitch range can be switched between plus and minus 8, 16 and 50% ranges, and definitely seems more stable at the wider extremes of those second two than on some other tables I've used. One feature which I definitely appreciate but will absolutely never use is the step pitch mode. This switches the pitch slider to another range, plus or minus 33%, and breaks that range up into 16 notes, with the pitch staying at one note until you reach the next, in steps as the name implies. Now, as I say, this is not a feature for me, but I guarantee it will be a huge hit with turntablists who want to add advanced tone plays into their routines. I'm sure that Pioneer DJ will have videos out soon enough showing the potential of the feature, and I expect that people like Buck Rogers will be all over it. Unlike on most turntables, the platter is screwed into place, but I thought I'd take it off and have a look inside. The main motor assembly is covered up by the Magvel clamp section, but it seems to be, and according to the specs it is, much the same as on the PLX-1000, and the platter is lined with rubber to reduce resonance through that. And that brings us to the rest of the digital trickery built into the Cross-12. Most of it revolves around that Magvel clamp. In the digital realm, it's a crucial part of the system. As standard, the Cross-12 is designed for use with both Serato DJ Pro and Rekordbox, although as some other software platforms are compatible with those control signals or timecode, I've no doubt that there will be mappings for those too soon enough. Why does the control signal matter? Well, let me explain. So I'm going to take a moment to break down the digital aspect of the Cross-12 because, I'll be honest with you, this is not what I thought it was going to be. When I first heard about this product, when they first told me about it, I assumed that it was going to be Pioneer DJ's equivalent of a Rain 12, but was also a turntable, so it had a tone arm on it. That's not what this is. Right? The Rain 12 is effectively an HID device. The information about the spindle position and the spindle speed, etc. on the Rain 12, that is sending out effectively MIDI data to the software via USB. You run the software in internal mode, and that is sent from there, and that's all just sent basically via MIDI. It's quite very high resolution, but it is just sending it effectively via MIDI. So it's an HID setup. This is not that. And to kind of highlight that, I will point out to you here that this particular Cross-12 right now is not connected via USB to my computer. You can see the cue pads down there are not illuminated. There is no connection via USB from this turntable to my computer. This is running, I've got the RCAs on the back running out into the phono level inputs, because there's no preamp on here, of the DJM S11, and the S11 is connected via USB to the computer and therefore Serato. But this is effectively now a dumb turntable. There's no digital connectivity, right? So we're in analog needle mode right now, and it's going to work like normal. So I've got the Serato control vinyl here, sending out the noise map control tone, goes through the needle, the cartridge, the tone arm, out through the RCAs, into the RCA inputs on the back of the S11. This is how DVS has worked forever, right? This is how it works. Standard stuff. And that works fine, right? No issues with that. Of course, that's going to work great. But it is all just analog. It's going through those RCAs. Where do things change? Well, now I'm going to switch over. So let's take this off. I'm going to switch over to digital vinyl. And I'm going to take the Magvel clamp. I'm going to clamp it on the record. I'm going to adjust the tension to what I want it to be. And then I'm going to start playing. So what's happening here? Well, at this point now, this has all been bypassed. The tone arm, the cartridge, all been bypassed. The control signal, the noise map control tone for Serato is now being sent from internally within the Cross-12. And so what that gives you is a very, very clean control tone that is not susceptible to vibration or anything like that. So it'll be perfect for big stages, etc. And you can use, of course, any vinyl. You don't have to use a proper piece of Serato control vinyl. You can use any record you like. You don't even need a record. You can just use the slip mat. As long as the clamp is in place, which is obviously held on by magnets, like literally you can just play with a slip mat. You know, you can play with anything on there as long as it's clamping it down, which the magnets do. So what are the benefits to this? Why would you want this instead? Well, a lot of turntablists that I've spoken to don't really get on with that kind of HID thing. The fact that you are in internal mode, the fact that the hot cues, for example, perform differently. They actually function in a different way in internal mode compared to relative mode with DVS. And DVS, you know, it's something we're very familiar with by now. A lot of us kind of take it for granted, but actually DVS is the closest experience you get to playing real vinyl, but with digital files. Like, you can't really get any closer than that in terms of how it feels, how it responds when you're scratching, cutting, pitching up and down. It's just a very, very natural way of working. And so I can definitely see why they've done it this way. It does add a layer of complexity because you have to recall, right? This is, again, we're still not connected digitally to this setup at all. I've just got the RCAs coming out, phono level into the S11. And it doesn't make any difference. I could switch it back to analog. It's going to work there. Switch it back to digital. It's going to work there. But of course, then we are removing the cartridge and all the inherent issues with the cartridge from the equation. And then we do have, just to kind of reinforce this disconnect, right? We do have the USB connection. So now I'm going to take my USB and I'm going to plug it into my computer. So that is now plugged in. Let's do that. Find the socket. There we go. So that is now plugged in. We have our hot cues, etc., all down here. But that doesn't make any difference to what's being sent out of here. So we have deck select up here, right? We've now got the key and the BPM coming from Serato right now. But if I change to deck 2 or deck 3, I now have MIDI control over deck 3. But this control tone is still being sent to deck 1 because that's where the RCAs are going. So I hope that makes sense to you. It is slightly tricky to get your head around. And if you want the full functionality of the Cross-12 with DVS, you're going to need to connect the RCAs and the USB. It's not quite as plug and play as some other solutions where you might only need a USB cable and you're good to go. You do need both if you want to use digital vinyl DVS with the Cross-12. And so I hope that makes sense to you, because it took me a minute to understand it. Once you do understand how the CRSS12 is designed to interact with software, the process of using it is absolutely superb. Using the digital signal makes for a highly responsive setup with pinpoint accuracy, and I couldn't detect any noticeable cue drift in my testing when scratching. What's really great about the system with Serato is that it's effectively sending a very long official Serato noise map control tone to the software via an audio file. It's not just a generic 2K tone, so the performance really should be no different from Serato control vinyl or the digital file which Serato themselves provide, and in my testing I found that to be the case. I will note that Rane also enabled DVS mode for Serato DJ Pro with the Mark II version of their 12, so this is not the first time we've seen that idea in this space, but the difference here is that the Cross is an actual turntable too, so it's a much more flexible device. I was a big fan of how those Ranes performed, but as someone who plays both digital music and vinyl, there was a level of convenience which was just missing for me. At this point now, I'll take you through how the controls on the CRSS12s work with Serato and Rekordbox. So we'll talk through the pads then. I really like these pads. They're very small, like they are little, but they're still big enough. They are recessed, so you can't really like hit them by mistake. And as I say, they're very responsive. And the good thing is they've kind of taken what, you know, Ian Golden and Novation did with the Dicers years ago, and they have kept it to 4 pads because they really centered it around this corner and above the foot. So when you actually hit on these pads, there is very little vibration transferred through to the rest of the turntable. So if you are using Serato with needles instead of with the digital control, then actually you shouldn't have any problems there. So it all just feels reassuringly kind of solid down here. But yeah, so we have the 4 pads, we can shift to 5 to 8. Back to 1 to 4. Then if we double tap hotkey, that puts us into loop roll mode. And if you want to change like the loop roll parameters, then you can do that. You don't do it with shift. You see you've got parameter under here. You don't do it with shift, you do it by holding the 5 to 8, because if you did it with shift, you might accidentally delete cues or something like that. So you hold shift and then we can change the parameters. So now and that will apply to any of these modes that have parameter options. You do have access to those there, which is very cool to see. So yeah, double tap is your loop roll. Then we can go shift, so go back to hotkey. Shift and hotkey puts us into the marked mode there, which is stems. So there is stems. Instant access to your stems. And what I really like about this is when you go to 5 to 8, that gives you the stems effects. So if I was using this with an S11, for example, I'm pretty sure I would leave it like this all the time, because I use those stems effects buttons constantly, and right now I remap those to some hotkey pads, so I would have it set to this constantly pretty much. But yeah, love that. Then there is another one as well. If you go back to hotkey, shift, double tap, then you have user assignable MIDI controls there, so you can map those to anything you want in the software. Then on the second one we have sampler, so this is obviously sampler, and then your samples 5 through 8. Then if we double tap, that gives us saved loops. We have access to saved loops, again up to 8 of them there as well. And if we go back to sampler, shift, push that, then we have actually scratch bank, again 5 to 8. So we got access to all 8, you know, very quickly with just with that single button push. And then if we go shift double tap, that gives us another assignable user mode as well, and again 8 pads on each. So even if you're not happy with the default mapping on here, there's plenty of options for you with those custom mappings. You could easily set one up and just leave it in that all the time. But yeah, overall I really like the pads. I think the way they're laid out is very good, the positioning is very good, the way they feel is very good. Yes, some people will bemoan the fact that there isn't just 8 of them there, but for me, yeah, I'm very happy with this arrangement. One quick extra note before we move on to Rekordbox, I forgot to mention the instant doubles option, which is enabled by holding shift and pressing the 5 to 8 button. I'm sure some DJs would prefer that to not require shift, but I'm good with it as it is. You can easily press the controls with 2 fingers at once. So I'm going to run you through quickly how it all works with Rekordbox. There isn't really much more to talk about here because it works just as well as it does with Serato DJ Pro. I've selected the Rekordbox tone, and I'm in the digital vinyl needle mode, and it all works just as nicely. Super clean, super accurate, tight control. Then the pads themselves, you can select any of the 4 decks. Obviously up on the deck select, we have hot cues. The markings here all kind of line up with what we have in the software. So we've got 8 hot cues. Then we've got shift and hot cue is stems, or track separation, as they call it in Rekordbox. Double tap hot cue is pad effects. I do love pad effects, they are great fun. And again, 2 pages of those. And they can be customized in the software. Then shift and double tap is a user assignable mode over there. The other button we have sampler. Shift and sampler is their equivalent of scratch bank. So again, the markings are all kind of lining up. Double tap is beat jump. Again, 2 pages there. And shift and double tap again is a user assignable mini mode. So yeah, really nothing different to talk about there. Just wanted to show you it works just as nicely here in Rekordbox as it does in Serato DJ Pro. So I've discussed the Cross-12 as a turntable. I've shown you how it works with software. Now it's time to talk price. And I hope you're sitting down, because if you didn't know this already, then the street price of $1,399 each in the US might well give you a shock. We're talking just shy of $2,800 for a pair, which makes them comfortably the most expensive production DJ turntables ever sold. What does that mean from a value perspective though? Well, let's look at the competition. The Reign 12 Mark IIs are $900 each, so if all you ever want to do is play with software, that's a great deal. But you can't play records on those, so you might need to get some regular turntables as well. Phase, a product I absolutely swear by these days, has changed the situation when it comes to actual turntables. Whilst there are none available which offer the same kind of onboard digital DVS solution that the Cross-12s do, by adding phase to any existing decks, you can come fairly close to the same kind of experience. For example, the Reloop 8000 Mark IIs at $900 each can play records and offer a plethora of MIDI controls on board. I don't think they are quite as good as the Cross-12s as a pure turntable, although it's pretty close, but they do lack the direct digital DVS control over your software. Adding phase for an extra $450 bumps the total package up to over $2,200. We are getting closer to the price of the Cross-12s there, and without the same tight integration of analog and digital. The real outlier, and I think the product which actually starts to make the Cross-12s look like a genuinely good deal, is the Technics SL1200 Mark VII. I thought they were selling those for $1,000 each, but it seems they've just had a price bump to $1,100. So a pair of those plus phase is $2,650, and you don't get any kind of software controls with that setup. So in that context, I do actually think the Cross-12 isn't such a bad value proposition at all. You get fantastic analog turntables with built-in digital DVS functionality, the awesome Magvel clamp system, and direct controls for your software of choice. What I really hope is that the Cross-12s become the turntable of choice for rental houses and system installers, taking the place that the PLX-1000 has inhabited in recent years. Since the original 1200 series left the market, those kind of buyers were looking for a reliable, easily sourced option, and the 1000 filled that gap. The biggest benefit to that happening will be for Serato and Rekordbox DVS users in venues where they have club-style mixers like the DJM A9 or the 900 Nexus 2. Used with something like an S11, the MIDI controls on the Cross-12 might seem a little superfluous, but when using a mixer without pads, they would come in incredibly handy. It will be interesting to see if the battle style layout puts off some of that rental and installer market, especially as the 1000 will remain a current product as far as I know. Will techno DJs complain about having the markings on the top plate at 90 degrees? I don't know. But frankly, if the Cross-12 of all of the options on the market today was to become a new industry standard turntable, I would not be mad at that at all. Not one bit. So there you go, my thoughts on the PLX Cross-12s from Pioneer DJ. I can't stand here and pretend to you that the pricing of these is not a problem, because it is a problem, right? Sticker shock wise, they're really expensive. They are hella pricey. And it's kind of hard to justify when you look at, let's say, the combination of a pair of Reloop 8000 Mark IIs and phase. Like, combine that together, you're getting pretty much all the functionality of the Cross 12s at a much, much lower price. Do I think the Cross 12 is a better turntable overall? Yes. Do I think it's better for vinyl because of the Magvel clamp, etc.? Yes. So, like, it is a better product. If money was no object and I was kitting out my home studio, absolutely, I would want Cross 12s in there. They are my favorite DJ turntable today. Absolutely, they are. But that's not the reality for me. You know, money is an object. It does matter to me. And I suspect for nearly all of you watching this, you know, it counts, right? The amount you spend on something. And especially when you consider that my DJ life, I can't put Cross 12s on my rider and have them at every gig. I turn up and I use what turntables they've got. So I'm still going to need to own phase for my gigs. So it's just, as a value proposition, I think there's a lot there for the money. And I really appreciate the attention to detail and the engineering that Pioneer DJ have put into the Cross 12s. I do think they are a fantastic product, but they're just very expensive. So I can't really conclude any further than that. Yes, they're my favorite turntables. Yes, they cost an absolute ton. So I'd love to hear from you guys and girls in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts. I know there will be plenty of people going, no shot, zero chance am I going to spend that kind of money on a pair of turntables. But there will be some of you who maybe have spent close to that price or more on a pair of minty, fresh M5Gs. You know, a really good condition pair of those today. It's going to set you back not far off the price of a pair of Cross 12s. And obviously you get all the digital stuff, you get the MIDI control. So there are definitely different perspectives, and I would love to hear yours. Thank you for watching this episode of Beatsource Tech. I do hope you've enjoyed it or found it useful. If you have, please give the video a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe to the channel and you turn on notifications so you don't miss any future videos. I'll see you next time.